There's a particular kind of suffering that doesn't look like suffering. It looks like romance. It looks like destiny, like chemistry, like I've never felt this before. But beneath the poetry, beneath the late-night texts and the obsessive replaying of conversations, beneath the fantasies you mistake for hope, there's something colder, something clinical, something that behaves less like love and more like a neurological hostage situation.
You don't just like them. You don't simply miss them. You are invaded by them. They colonize your thoughts. They infect your mornings. They hijack your attention mid-sentence, mid-meeting, mid-prayer. And the most humiliating part is that you can see it happening, yet you cannot stop it.
This is not love. Love is a bond. Love stabilizes. Love is a slow-burning architecture of trust, reciprocity, and shared reality. What you're experiencing is limerence, a mental state of involuntary obsession, a craving, a trance, a loop. And like any addiction, it is strongest when the supply is unpredictable, when they give you just enough attention to keep you alive, but not enough to set you free.
In this episode, we are going to dissect limerence like surgeons. We will separate love from obsession, bonding from craving, devotion from withdrawal. We will trace it back to the research of Dorothy Tennov, the woman who gave this phenomenon its name, and we will expose the mechanism that turns rejection into fuel: intermittent reinforcement. The psychological weapon that keeps gamblers gambling and lovers begging.
If you've ever felt trapped by someone who doesn't choose you, if you've ever romanticized someone who barely knows you, if you've ever been loyal to a fantasy more than to your own dignity, this isn't a love story. It's a neurological crime scene. Welcome to UmbraDecode. The term limerence was introduced by psychologist Dorothy Tennov in the late 1970s. She wasn't writing poetry. She wasn't selling romance. She was documenting a pattern so consistent it behaved like a syndrome. Limerence is not simply having a crush. It is an involuntary cognitive and emotional fixation on a specific person, what Tennov called the limerent object. Not the person you like, the person your brain has decided is the key to salvation.
And here is the defining feature. Limerence requires uncertainty, not stable affection, not secure bonding, uncertainty. Because uncertainty creates obsession the way hunger creates hallucinations. When the brain cannot confirm safety, it scans. When it cannot confirm belonging, it strategizes. When it cannot confirm love, it invents.
So you replay their words like evidence. What did they mean by that? Why did they smile? Why did they leave me on red? Are they thinking of me? Did I ruin it? You begin to behave like an investigator, but you are investigating a mirage. And limerence is not only thought, it's physiology. It's your stomach tightening when their name appears, your pulse spiking when they text, your mood depending on a single emoji. Tennov found that limerence often contains intrusive thoughts, idealization, when you exaggerate their virtues, minimize their flaws, emotional dependency on reciprocation, euphoria when rewarded, despair when ignored, fear of rejection, compulsive rumination. And here's the most important part. Limerence is not about who they are. It's about what they represent. They become a symbol, a vessel, a projection screen for everything you feel you lack. They become the cure for your loneliness, the proof you're worthy, the escape from your current life, the redemption of your past, the promise of a new identity. In other words, they become your religion, and limerence is worship. But love is not worship. Love is recognition. Love says, I see you clearly, and I choose you freely. Limerence says, I cannot see you clearly, and I cannot choose anything else.
Now, to be precise, limerence can occur in early romance. Many relationships begin with intense infatuation, but limerence becomes pathological when it persists despite clear rejection, it causes self-abandonment, it replaces reality with fantasy, it triggers withdrawal symptoms, it becomes the central organizing principle of your life. And this is why limerence feels spiritual, because it mimics meaning, it mimics destiny, it mimics transcendence. But the truth is simpler and more brutal. Limerence is the brain chasing a reward, and the brain does not care if the reward destroys you.
Let's draw the line. Because if you cannot define the enemy, you will keep inviting it into your bed. Love is bonding. Limerence is craving. Love is a secure system. Limerence is an activation system. Love expands your life. Limerence consumes it. Love makes you calmer over time. Limerence makes you more unstable. Love is built on mutual investment, shared reality, consistent effort, emotional safety, respect, time. Love is slow. Love is often quiet. Love doesn't need to torture you to prove it's real. But limerence is loud. Limerence is electric. Limerence is a drug that announces itself like a prophecy. Here is the psychological trap. People confuse intensity with truth. They think, if I feel this strongly, it must mean something. But intensity is not a measure of compatibility. Intensity is a measure of nervous system arousal. It's adrenaline, it's cortisol, it's dopamine spikes. It's the body interpreting uncertainty as significance. And in limerence, the person becomes a slot machine. You pull the lever, a text. Sometimes you win, a flirt. Sometimes you lose, silence. And your brain begins to associate them with reward, not love, reward. This is why limerence can feel stronger than real love, because real love doesn't spike you. Real love doesn't put you on a dopamine roller coaster. It gives you something far less dramatic, but far more valuable: peace. Now, let's go deeper. The brain has multiple systems for attachment: lust, sexual desire; attraction, romantic focus, pursuit; attachment, bonding, long-term security. Limerence hijacks the attraction circuitry. It creates tunnel vision. You don't want a partner, you want that person. And often, you don't even want them as they are. You want the version of them that exists in your head. This is why limerence is allergic to reality. Because reality would interrupt the fantasy. Reality would force you to see their inconsistency, their selfishness, their disinterest, their cruelty, their mediocrity, their inability to choose you. But limerence doesn't want the truth. It wants the high. And when the high disappears, you experience something eerily similar to withdrawal. Withdrawal symptoms of limerence: restlessness, irritability, insomnia, loss of appetite, obsessive checking, emotional crashes, despair, panic, compulsive fantasizing. You are not too romantic. You are chemically dysregulated. Now here's the noir twist. Limerence often chooses people who are not available, not because you love pain, but because the brain is chasing a pattern, a familiar battlefield. And that brings us to the core question. Why do we obsess over people who don't want us? If you want to understand limerence, stop thinking about romance. Start thinking about behavioral conditioning. Because the human nervous system is not designed for poetry, it is designed for survival. And survival systems respond to rewards the same way, whether the reward is food, money, or affection. One of the most powerful behavioral forces ever discovered is intermittent reinforcement, a reward given unpredictably, not always, not never, just sometimes. In psychology, reinforcement schedules shape behavior, and the most addictive schedule is variable ratio reinforcement. It's what makes gambling addictive. You never know when the reward will come, so you keep playing, because the next pull might be the jackpot. Now, translate that into dating. You text them. Sometimes they reply instantly. Sometimes they disappear for 2 days. Sometimes they flirt. Sometimes they act cold. Sometimes they give you intimacy. Then they withdraw it like a punishment, and you begin to spiral. Because your brain starts working overtime to solve them, to predict them, to earn them, to win them. You tell yourself, they're just busy, they're scared, they've been hurt before, they're testing me, they're not good at communication, they don't realize how much I care. But the truth is usually simpler. They enjoy the attention without paying the price of commitment. And your limerence turns their indifference into a challenge. Because the brain is a pattern recognition machine. When it encounters uncertainty, it does not relax, it hunts. And if you are already vulnerable, lonely, stressed, insecure, starved for validation, intermittent reinforcement doesn't just affect you, it reprograms you. This is why the almost win is more powerful than the loss. If they never replied at all, you would grieve and detach. But they reply sometimes, just enough to keep your hope alive. And hope in limerence is not a gift, it is a leash. Now let's introduce the darker layer, the scarcity illusion. When something is scarce, it appears valuable. When affection is rare, it appears meaningful. Your brain begins to treat their attention like a rare mineral, and you become a miner, digging through darkness for a few grams of warmth. Often, the limerent object is perceived as socially superior, more attractive, more confident, more powerful, emotionally above you, and this creates a hierarchy. You stop relating to them as a human being. You relate to them as a verdict, a judge, a crown you must earn. So every interaction becomes loaded. A smile becomes a sign. A delay becomes doom. A compliment becomes oxygen. And your dignity becomes negotiable. Now, let's be surgical. Intermittent reinforcement works because it creates a loop. Anticipation, anxiety, reward, relief, craving again. And the brain learns, this person controls my emotional weather. You don't feel love, you feel dependency. And dependency always disguises itself as devotion. But devotion without reciprocity is not romance, it is self-erasure. And here is the cruelest twist of limerence. The less they give you, the more your brain tries to extract meaning, because uncertainty is interpreted as complexity, and complexity is interpreted as depth. So you start believing they must be special because they make me feel this much. No, they make you feel this much because they are inconsistent. Now, to be clear, some people do this unintentionally. They're avoidant, they're emotionally immature, they are confused. But some people do it strategically. They drip-feed attention to keep you orbiting. They become your sun, and you become a planet that forgot it could leave.
And once you're in orbit, you begin doing things you swore you'd never do. Double texting, apologizing for nothing, accepting disrespect, waiting in silence, stalking their social media, fantasizing about one day, sacrificing your priorities, reshaping your personality to be chosen. Limerence turns the human being into a beggar, not because you are weak, but because your brain is chasing relief.
And in that chase, you can lose months, years, sometimes a lifetime.
So the question becomes, if limerence is not love, what is it really? And why does it choose you? If this video gave you clarity, if it gave you language for something you couldn't explain, subscribe to UmbraDecode. We study the shadows not to fear them, but to command them. And remember this, the person you can't stop thinking about is not always the person you're meant to be with. Sometimes they are simply the lesson your nervous system needed to finally evolve.